righty. Welcome, everyone, to the Harder Not Smarter podcast. Today, we have an awesome guest with us, Teddy Mitrosilis. Did I pronounce that correct?
Nailed
Is
it,
that right?
Greg.
We were just going over this. I should have said it like 10 times fast before we went on to this, but
I already blanked out and forgot what he said.
yeah.
Got it.
Well, anyways, Teddy, thanks for joining us today. You're actually the first non-veteran that we've had on the podcast, but I think your background is just awesome. Coming from a D1 athlete at UNC, then working at ESPN and venturing into the entrepreneurial world, and now with Alto Studios right now doing the content creation for execs and all the stuff that you're up to. I know you write about you've got some relations with Navy SEALs from your past or currently. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, there's not much of a story. And first, thank you guys for having me on. This is not to stroke your egos, but I generally
Please stroke away.
Yeah, I'm sure you could. I have a ton of respect for the work y'all are doing. I think it's called the Vet Collective, and you can correct me if I've said that wrong. But I was not former military. Grandfathers were, but have some buddies who were in different branches of the military. My wife and I have just an extreme appreciation and respect and love for the people who serve our country. We've been involved in small ways in some foundations. And so it's just near and dear to my heart to support veterans. So honored to be the first non-vet. Hopefully I share something of value that will help someone. But to answer your question, Greg, yeah, I got a couple buddies who were SEALs and some other buddies as well. Came across actually in the endurance world is how I got connected with them, running races and doing adventures like that, and just got to know them a little bit. But other than that, I'm not as impressive as they are.
I don't know about that.
We'll see, I guess.
With your career, so you went D1 baseball, correct?
Yeah, junior college first for a couple of years, and then UNC.
Baseball's a rough path to go the professional riding. There's so many levels to it. Were there aspirations to go beyond college, and you decided to shift away from that, or was it a pretty sound plan that you're like, hey, I want to go through school, but I know that this isn't the path that I want to continue down?
Yeah, and I lost you for a couple seconds there, Kevin, but I think I got the question. Baseball is a rough path. It's what most folks don't really understand, I think, about the sport. Like you don't go from college to the major leagues. There's a bunch of levels and of minor league ball, and most guys never make it to the big leagues. And this is changing a little bit now, but still not drastically. In the minors, you don't make any money. Like no money, like below minimum wage. It's a brutal lifestyle. Candidly, I was not talented enough to make the majors and even play professionally. And I had a dream like every other kid who got obsessed with something at 4 years old. It was like, yeah, I'm going to be a big leaguer. And so from 4 to 21, I was like, big leagues or bust, baby. Like there's nothing else for me. And then I got to UNC, and it was like entering a different world. I was like, wow, these guys are just on a different level. Like it was my first time where I realized, what like actually talented people look like in the sport. And so I knew that I didn't want to like grind through, a decade of minor league ball and try to chase that dream. So candidly, I never had the opportunity. I wasn't good enough for it. But yeah, it's a game of failure, and it's a long road. It's not like the NBA or the NFL where you go right to, the top level. It's tough.
How was that realization for you when you're like, these guys are a whole different level above me. Maybe this isn't the path, and now I need to start figuring out where to go next.
Yeah, it was humbling. I remember, coming on. So I was a junior when I transferred to UNC. So fall, whatever year that was, I was 20 years old or something. And I remember the very first day on campus in Chapel Hill, there was like, I was a pitcher. There were like a dozen freshman pitchers coming into that class, and all of them were like 92, 93, 94, 95, like 96 miles an hour. And like the ball just like comes out differently. And I was not that. I was like upper 80s, good slider, like serviceable is what you would call me. And so from like day one, it was like, wow, there's a difference here. Now, I'm not trying to be, overly humble. Like there were things I brought to the table in terms of like mindset, character, ability to make pitches, right? Ability to handle adversity. Like I was a little more mature of a human being than those guys, but I just didn't have the pure talent. And so within like a year, it was very obvious to me. I was like, well, this probably is not going to be my path. And I had a brutal junior year with all kinds of challenges. I actually ended up not playing my senior year, deciding just to move on and go get ready for life after baseball. But yeah, it was a process, and it took me, I would say, most of my 20s really to like understand kind of what that experience was and how it really shaped me and what I learned from it. But it was good. And I look back now and I'm so thankful for it. And also some of the best relationships and best friends and best experiences I've ever had were in those years.
Yeah, heck yeah. So you majored in journalism there, and then you went over to ESPN. How was that? That seems like, I mean, from the outside looking in, working at ESPN seems like an absolute dream job. Like I think about like working at like what's Portnoy's company. I'm blanking on the name. Barstool, yeah. But I'm thinking like, it's not like Barstool. It's because I mean there's like actually like
professionalism
probably rules, yeah, professionalism at ESPN,
policies.
But like back in like the early 2010s, like that would have been like the bee's knees to me in terms of like sports.
Yeah, it was awesome. I moved up to, I call it a tour of duty in Bristol, Connecticut, which most people do who go up there, because it's like ESPN is such a focal point of Bristol, Connecticut. Like it is Bristol, Connecticut, basically. And so I went up there for 2 years. I lived in a town called Plainville, Connecticut, which
aptly name,
but is kind of what it sounds like. Lived above a biker bar. Right on Monday nights when the New York Giants were playing on Monday Night Football, like my floor was bumping from the guys downstairs. It was an experience, and I grew up in Southern California, wasn't used to any kind of winter. So a couple winters in the Northeast were an eye opener. It was interesting. I look back on that time in my life and like, yeah, working at ESPN was a dream for sure. But for me, I kind of very quickly realized like, okay, I'm probably not going to take the path of like becoming an actual journalist or becoming a reporter or a member of the media. It just didn't resonate with me. I think I was probably still a little too prideful and like still saw myself as an athlete and was like, I don't resonate at all with the media. I resonate completely with the athletes, and there was a conflict of interest there. But yeah, I ended up spending 5-ish years in the media business. I left ESPN after 2 years, moved back to LA, went to Fox Sports, and then eventually got out of the media, got into tech and started doing some other things. But it is a dream, although like anything else, when you're on the inside of it, like it definitely becomes a job, right? You're like, okay, it's not exactly like just being a fan at home, sitting around watching sports for a living. Like it is that, but it's like extreme hours, extreme work, and it becomes a grind like anything else.
I feel like going to work for ESPN after being a D1 athlete is like being in the military and then going to work for, Lockheed or some defense industry business. You're like, man, I'm going to make so much money. I'm going to have so many hours of just freedom, where before I was getting paid pennies on the dollar. And just, working for the man. And then you get there, you're like, oh, this sucks. I was much happier before, not making much money, but being with the boys and stuff. Just like completely different perspective once you're finally inside of it versus looking at it from the outside.
Yeah, it's different. And I was 22 years old, like young, hungry, just entering the professional world. Like I had walked away from playing sports at a fairly high level. Like I was looking for a place to like channel that energy. And I was probably like a little bit of a bull in a china shop, like in those years, right? Like looking to make my way. And in a company of that size, like that's hard to do a lot of times, especially when you're young. Like there just are levels and things about the culture, and there's no knock on ESPN, just more of a commentary on a being in a large organization like that, where like is part of the reason I went into startups. Like I really needed an environment that was a lot more like figure it out and like go solve hard problems and run, and like that kind of strength and characteristic and personality was valued, and that's kind of where I started to thrive. But I look back and had a lot of lessons and a lot of things learned at ESPN and Fox as well, and so it was a good experience for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's like very similar to the military transition in that you go, for me it was like I went from one bureaucracy to the next, and I was very like I needed to learn that lesson that was not for me in order to step into entrepreneurship. Um, but entrepreneurship and like being in the startup space is definitely it for me, because I can't I can't live in a matrix organization where my relationship with like someone 2 levels up is going to dictate whether a good idea gets passed or not. I need to be able to just implement that idea and go run with it. And that's what I appreciate about the startup space. And I think that's what a lot of veterans leave the military. And I think that they're like, I don't ever want to work with anybody ever or for anybody ever again. And that's why I think a number of them do pretty well on the entrepreneurship side.
Yeah, and you guys could talk much better than I could to that experience, but I would imagine there's also some element of like looking for a team again, like looking for a mission, like looking for something where like you're really chasing like a very clear objective, and it's exciting. Obviously, nothing's going to be as exciting probably as deploying with your buddies, but as an athlete, like I felt that on a much smaller scale, compared to what you guys did. But that's why it took a long time. It took me almost till 30 years old to like really figure out like this part of me, like what do I do with that, and how does it translate into life now as a father, as a husband, where it can be healthy and not unhealthy. And part of that, like I had to find the right professional environment, but I also had to start doing things outside. Like that's kind of what led into endurance sports. Like I needed things around, my life that could fit together and kind of scratch all those itches in a way that wasn't going to be destructive. Because unfortunately, I've got friends who, after their playing careers, like they went down tough paths because they just didn't know how to handle that. And I'm sure we all can relate to that in some way. But for me, faith, family, like we've got 2 little girls, like all of that is what's important to me, and figuring out how to operate in this new season of life. Like that was really kind of my 20s. And now I'm 35, so I'm still learning every day, of course. But that's where I feel like now I have a greater appreciation for that. It's like, okay, kind of step back, a little more perspective. And you're like, okay, what do I need in these different buckets of my life to feel fulfilled and where it all works together?
Where did you draw the most inspiration in terms of how you want to lead your life after you left the athletic space? Was it just figure it out, put your head down, push through that wall, or did you have some role models, mentors, people helping you along the way saying, yeah, I went through the same thing. This helped me a lot. Don't go down this path. It's a dead end or a fool's errand.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly had great mentors. I had great parents and have great parents. So first and foremost, like they, very blessed to have them, still healthy and around in my life. My parents were always great about fueling the path that my sister and I, we're very different people, my sister and I, but that we chose individually. They never forced us in any direction, but they kind of stepped back and they looked for like, where are they passionate and where do they want to go? And they fed that. And so coming out of, athletics and out of college into the professional world, still kind of the same. No one really told me what to do. No one told me to, hey, go to ESPN, move to Connecticut. Like I think candidly, my parents wanted me to move back home to Southern California. But so they kind of just let me go on my path. And along the way, like, there's a saying, like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Mentors emerge at the right time for me, but they didn't just come out of nowhere. Like I think I had a path I had to walk. and it had different twists and turns, and still, still do, even today. And so that was a lot of like trial and error, honestly. Like I had some good managers, good bosses, good friends. In those days, like I made a lot of mistakes, and I had people say like, "Hey, I see in you, a lot of good things. Like I see the passion, I see the drive, I see someone who works hard. Maybe you want to kind of do it this way, right? And like maybe that over there, like making that decision is going to not work so well in this environment of an organization, right? So I had to learn some of those lessons, but really like the most valuable thing was for me was just learning to trust my own instincts, like um, learning to make my own decisions. Like even I kind of trace back, my life really around like 18 years old. I was leaving high school, and I knew I was going to go to a junior college for a couple years. The junior college that most kids in my area would have went to was El Camino in Torrance, California. And for whatever reason, I just had this feeling of like, I just need a new environment. Like I just need to be around new people. I need to see a different perspective. Like I don't want an extension of high school. And I played summer ball with some buddies who were in Lakewood, and they had a different mentality, different mindset, came from like different cultures of programs. And so I went to Long Beach City College for JUCO. And so that was kind of like the first step that was like, no one told me to do that. That was like an instinctual feeling of like, you have an idea and a path of where you want to go, but where your environment has to change to help you get there. Mm-hmm. And so I took that leap. And then how did I get to North Carolina? Like no one said, "Hey, what about North Carolina?" No one said like Chapel Hill, want to check it out? Like was nowhere on the radar. And I don't even remember honestly, like how it first came up. I think I was looking for like good journalism schools and good baseball programs. And then when I went and visited my sophomore year, I just fell in love with it. And like in my gut, I was like, yep, like this is the next place. Like, I don't know why, but this is an environment I need to be in. Like people are doing things at a different level here. And then after that, like all the way up, like going to ESPN, moving to Connecticut, going back to Fox, leaving Fox early, which most people saw as like, hey, you're doing great. You're on a stable path. Like you're having success. You're 25, like heading up like an executive track. Like you're going to go to a startup now that's like 14 people and like is a fledgling business. No one said to do that, right? But in my gut, I was like, I need to go. Like this is going to push me and help me grow in new ways. And so I think, and that theme has extended even to this day in my life. And that's what I've really, I think, come to understand and value, which is nobody can really tell you the right thing to do. Like people can give you their perspective, and their perspective is valuable, but you have to contextualize it. And at the end of the day, you need to take ownership of the decisions that you make. And some are going to be good, some are not going to be good. But in both cases, like you just keep moving forward.
I like that, man. That's good advice for anybody transitioning out of the military. Because I think that people get pushed into certain tracks when they leave the military because there's so many, like you get the big companies like Amazon. I talk about this all the time, like Amazon, any of those big companies that have a huge recruitment pool or leverage a huge recruitment pool from the military. They know exactly what you make coming out of the military. They know exactly what would entice you into taking a position with them. And they know what you bring to the table. And so I think a lot of people get locked into those career tracks. And I always talk about how it's just such a great opportunity to like really figure out what you're passionate about and go pursue that, as opposed to just doing, the safe thing that everybody tells you should be doing. It's such a formative time of your life, transitioning out of the military, and even any career transition, like transitioning out of athletics. I hold to this day that like there's so many parallels between transitioning out of the military and transitioning out of athletics. I think there's just a ton of overlap. So yeah, I resonate with what you said for sure. I mean, shit, I ended up in the Netherlands right now. So, and that's just all on like, I think this is a good idea. Like this feels right. We should do it. Got a young family. Let's just go and do it. So you just got to trust that gut sometimes.
Yeah. For everyone's going to be different, for me, I credit God. Like I lean on my faith a lot. I think part of my maturation as an individual has been learning to be less self-reliant and realize that I'm not as strong as I think I am, and I'm not as good as I think I am, and I can't do it all on my own. Like, that's actually pretty foolish. And so, some people, maybe it's not God, maybe it's mentors, maybe it's friends, but whatever it is, for me though, it's very clearly like I'm trying to walk a path that God has for me. I'm trying to humble myself. I'm trying to serve. I'm trying to let go of my own selfish wants and desires and preconceived notions about how things should go, and just be open to how they ought to be and how I can be most effective. And that's freaking humbling, man. Like, it's hard to do. Like, it is really hard to do. A lot of times, in my life, like, I feel a tension of trying to force something, whether it's in business, like force an outcome here, or force this relationship to work over here, or, in my marriage, right? Like, my wife and I are at odds at something. And I'm like, gosh, like, why can't she just understand what I'm thinking, but then you step back and you check yourself, right? And you're like, hey, well, like, how do I turn like the mirror on me? And like, how can I be better here, be more humble, be more empathetic, be more patient, be more kind, be more understanding? And for me, I think when I say like learning to trust my instincts, what I really meant by that is like, I'm learning to trust God, and then just listening. And I've learned that for me, not preaching to people, this may not apply to you, but for me, that is the path that I need to walk. And if it's me trying to, my ego, my pride, whatever it is, trying to make the decision, for me, it usually does not end too well.
And so jumping into the world of startups, first off, how did you even get introduced to these guys at such a small or early stage? And you said there was 14, 15 people at the company. How did you go from Fox to finding out about this, and also knowing that you want to shift it? Because it's virtual reality training, right?
Yeah, it was a company called Striver, STRIVR, and
got to get rid of that extra vowel. It's the trending thing.
Yeah, probably not a great branding move, but yeah, this was like fall of like 2015. They started in spring of 2015, and they started as a sports training business. They were training athletes using VR, and specifically quarterbacks. And I was overseeing college sports digital production at Fox, and we had a guy, good friend of mine, great journalist named Bruce Feldman. Bruce did a story on this like innovative technology that was starting to emerge in football, which was Striver. And I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. That's kind of curious what they're doing. And so I just took note of it, and I followed it into the following year, into 2016. And by the time around like summer of 2016, my girlfriend / almost fiance was living in now my wife, she was living in the Bay Area, and that's where she's from. And I was heading up there to visit her, and I was talking to her, and I was saying like, I'm feeling like I need to make a change. Like, I'm burnt out on the media business. I want to do something else. There's this company that is really interesting, and I'm just intrigued by the startup world. And my wife's a go-getter, and she's like, well, you should just email the CEO tonight and just go see him tomorrow. I was like, okay. And so
sure. I'll just email the CEO.
Sure,
it's fine.
Because they were in Palo Alto. And so I emailed CEO, this guy named Derek Belch. Derek's a great guy. He was a kicker at Stanford, and the company started because his master's thesis, he was on David Shaw's staff at Stanford, and his master's thesis was how to use VR to help athletes. And so it worked so well at Stanford, David Shaw was like, hey, you should just go make this a company. You should not go up the coaching route. And so anyway, he responded and said, yeah, come by our office tomorrow. And so I did, and we hit it off. And then he connected me with a couple guys down who were running the LA office. And my buddy Logan Mulvey, and then Brian Murphy, those two guys. And I met with them in LA, and we just all hit it off. And I loved the work they were doing. And right at that time, they were making a pivot into the enterprise space. So Arkansas football was one of Striver's early customers, and a Walmart executive was and I think probably still is a big booster at Arkansas. And that guy was in the football offices looking at what they were doing with their quarterbacks. And he was like, we've got 2 million people in our stores, and we give them these like 300-page binders and then tell them like 2 days later to go do their jobs. Like, why can't we train them this way? Like, it's different context, but it's the same thing, right? You're in a situation. You need to have situational awareness. You need to pick up on visual cues. You need to make decisions. You need to communicate, like similar stuff, just different environment. And that was just like light bulb moment for Striver. And that was happening right when I was talking to these guys. And that kind of blew me away to see the potential of that. And so that's what drew me in. And so when I joined Striver, that was in the fall of 2016, the sports was a very small part of their business. Well, at that time, it was a big part of their business, but becoming small. And it was just a full-on pivot and sprint into the enterprise. And so I spent the next almost 6 years doing a bunch of things, getting early stage startup experience, like building out teams, building out different functions of the organization, managing, leading people, all under the umbrella of the services side of the business. A catch-all phrase would probably be, enterprise consulting. And that was awesome. And I kind of fell in love with the startup environment and the entrepreneurial environment. And that set me down that path. Are we frozen?
We were frozen there for a second. It's all good. So, Kevin, and you're on mute. What a shit show. Well, we'll edit this part out. Anyways, something we forgot to mention at the beginning of the show is that no matter, even if it looks like shit, it's still recording locally. So like everything you just said will still like record, and I'll just like pick this back up
Cool.
when you finish there. But one question I was going to ask you was, were you bummed that they moved? I mean, obviously this is probably great experience getting enterprise level deals. I mean, that's just a whole different ball game. But were you bummed that they were moving away from the sports arena as you were coming in there? Because I mean, that seems like a cool gig to like go and like teach quarterbacks how to use this technology. I don't know. That to me,
it was cool. I wasn't really bummed because I had spent so much time in and around athletics and then sports media. I was like, I could do something other than sports for a while. And like, but what's funny about it is even when we started selling into the enterprise, all of like the enterprise executives at these companies, and we were serving the Fortune 500, they just want to talk about the sports stuff. It was the greatest like sales tool ever. You go into wherever, you go into some like corporation in Dallas, and you're like, yeah, put this headset on and let us show you what we're doing with the Dallas Cowboys. And it was like, wait, what? And so it kind of never left the fabric and the DNA of the company, even though now today, I don't even know if they're still training sports teams.
So going through all this, how is it being at such a small organization after having been, UNC, I'm sure a massive baseball program, ESPN and Fox, obviously huge organizations. All of a sudden you're at a 15-person company that sounds like it's spread out, at least between Northern California, Southern California, but it sounds like it's really spread out throughout the country. How is it seeing a small organization operating for the first time? Where you're just like, this is a shit show. This is like all hazard to the wind, or you're like, these guys actually have their shit together, and it's pretty cool watching this grow and develop.
What I learned is all companies are different degrees of shit shows, and like
yeah,
you look back, and you look back 2 years later, and you're like, okay, we really were a shit show then. We're just a different one now, and so it always has like these levels. But yeah, I mean, I think what stood out to me, number one, was like the pace. Right, you have to run at a different pace in that world, and that's going to be some people are going to love that, and some people are not going to be a fit for that. That was like my first realization. The second was, like there's not a lot figured out at all. And as the company grows, I was there from about 15 people to 150, so like 10x the size of the organization. at each level, right, you're figuring new things out. So you're kind of always in this mindset um, of growing, accelerating, refining, optimizing. It just looks different depending on the level. But I love the agility of all that, right? And I think for the right individuals, like there's a lot of opportunity to come into that environment and do a lot, learn a lot. Startups kind of accelerate your learning curve by like orders of magnitude, and they give you opportunities to build skills and experiences that you're just not going to have anywhere else. Like, at that age, probably. Right. And so I think that's the real opportunity for the right person. But I
And it
also
sounds like you're kind of looking for that type of situation where you have a ton of autonomy. You're able to make decisions. There isn't layer after layer after layer of bureaucracy. It's like, no, we have this new area, this new business, this new region we want to capitalize on. Teddy, go out there and figure out how to make it happen and report back when you figure it out.
Yeah, for me, it was less autonomy, but opportunity, right? Like to create value and to learn and grow faster, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people that really struggle in that type of environment where they're like, I need to have rigid left and right lateral limits of this is what you should be working on. Don't venture outside of this. And that's why a lot of people go work for Amazon and other Fortune 500 companies, because they just want to have that structure. They don't want to have too much movement because they feel lost. They don't know how to plan out their day, schedule their time, prioritize their own tasks. Obviously, that it's something that you took very much to heart because you eventually left them and started your own business. How did that come about where you're like, this is really cool. I'm having a great time here, but I'm actually going to go take all these lessons learned and start my own thing and go even farther to the smaller side than 14 people. I'm just going to go for a company of one.
Yeah, for sure. And which, by the way, like that's okay too. If you're not the type of person who wants that, like that's fine. I think in our culture today, there is startups get elevated to like a level of perceived sexiness that I think
It's super
actually
romanticized.
it sets people up to fail actually, because you then get in and then you get kicked in the face immediately, and you're like, wait, this actually is extremely difficult and extremely stressful, and I'm thinking about making payroll, and there's people problems every day, right? And so like there's no shame in saying like I want to be a great employee, like I
Mm-hmm.
want to do a great job, be part of a great team, and go home at night and have a good family. Like awesome, right? So like I do not like to push people into startups that aren't just like craving for it. But yeah, I spent a while at Shriver, and then kind of similar to my time in the media business, I just sort of felt it was time eventually to move on and see the next challenge and the next opportunity to grow. I was also 6 years in an early stage startup is a long time. It's kind of like dog years. By that time, we had gotten married and had 2 children, and I was like, man, I need a break. And so I took a year actually just to get back to writing and doing some solo consulting with some organizations. So I was like very in control of my time. I had lost my like love for writing and storytelling while I was in the media business, but then I kind of recaptured it later on, and it just was like in a different way that I wanted to leverage those skills. And so I took about a year to just do that, to write and to consult, and then I was ready. I kind of felt the itch again to build something with a team. I'm not really a solopreneur. I know it's become like very common these days. I prefer to build something cool with cool people. I find that is fun. And so through relationships I'd built, an opportunity came up to become a co-founder and managing partner of a business called Alto Studios. And so now we're 17 months into building Alto. Alto is an executive and corporate communications company. So we help companies of different sizes with communications needs. And so, yeah, we're back in the trenches. Like the team is 13, I think, full-time people as of today, like 18 total with contractors, doing really well, lots of demand. And, but every day you're just kind of fighting for the next step is what it feels like to be in the trenches, right? Like things are going well objectively, but there's just so much more we can do. So But yeah, I'm enjoying that process again. And I'm sure, in however many years down the line, like I'm probably not going to be at Alto for 30 years. I'm sure I'll hit the next milestone. We'll have, a great outcome hopefully. And then go from there into whatever the next, season of life that has in store.
So with Alto, are you what's the goal there? What's like you talk about like you guys are growing next. What's the next step look like for you guys?
What's the goal? Build a great cash flowing, profitable company.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
and that's what we want. Yeah. You know what I love about so one of the things that actually has been cool for me with Alto, and maybe this is some good insight for any veteran or anyone who's listening to this and thinking about like, okay, I want to do something entrepreneurial, but I'm not sure maybe what that looks like. Striver for me was like the venture capital backed startup experience, like raise a bunch of money, grow at all costs, maybe not all costs, but most costs, try to scale fast and become a unicorn, right? I'm simplifying, but that was basically that story. Alto is a very different business. We are bootstrapped and profitable from day one. And we are funding the business. Now the business funds itself, but we want to build a great big business, but we're not going to raise capital, and we don't have this like artificial number we need to get to make it a worthwhile endeavor. And that has been like a drastically different entrepreneurial experience. I'm personally having more fun on this one because it just feels a little more gritty. It's truly like a small business. It's more nimble, right? You kind of build something with your own hands rather than with other people's money, which is not a criticism of venture capital or PE. Like that's a perfectly viable path for the right business. But that's been a cool experience. So someone who's thinking about like, yeah, I want to build a business or become an entrepreneur, I would dig into like, okay, what are the different paths to doing that? I just mentioned two, but there are more than that. I highly, highly, highly encourage people to start out in some kind of like service business where you need to take some idea, a service or a simple product into the market. You need to go find a customer. You need to deliver. And you need to do it again and again and again. And then you need to hire a team, and then you need to manage a team, right? And then you build slowly from cash flow. Like that to me is the healthiest way to enter entrepreneurship. And I think we're starting to see a macro trend and turn back to that now, where there's a lot less capital. It's harder to get capital, and profitability. Even if you're raising capital, like investors are much more concerned with profitability. So I know that's not a direct answer to your question, Greg, but that's kind of really what we're trying to build.
That was great. I mean, Greg and I talk about it all the time with starting our own businesses. We had eerily similar paths. We both joined the military. He went Green Beret, I went SEALs. But beyond that, we both got out of the military about the same time. COVID was going on. We got into recruiting. He was med tech. I was life sciences. We saw that the recruiting space isn't that complicated. It's like being a realtor. You don't need to get a special degree to go do it. And we took the opportunity to leave the business and start something of our own, because a service industry is it's a very low barrier to entry to start a business. You don't need to have a product. You don't need to design it. You don't need to ship it and store it and all that other stuff that goes into consumer packaged good type business, or something where you need to actually develop a physical product. And so it's easy for people to get into it and cut their teeth in entrepreneurship because there's low risk. You don't need to have a ton of money. If it fails, you're not putting millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars into something that may or may not disappear. And so learning from recruiting gave me the foundational knowledge of business, because whether you're starting a product business or a service business, the foundational level of running a business is very similar. And now we've been able to expand to teaching entrepreneurship, starting our marketing agency, doing a lot of the creative stuff like writing a newsletter, creating a podcast. All these things fall into it. But without that
Yeah.
that foundational knowledge, it would have never been possible. So I 100% agree and understand where you came from with getting into the space. It makes it much more attainable and less stressful because you're not trying to constantly stay ahead of the financial curve of getting more money, get more money, get more money, get more clients. You can build something
Yeah.
more sustainably.
And it also allows you to have a life-changing outcome at a, I don't want to say a faster pace. It's often not faster, but it makes a life-changing outcome much more viable. Like, you don't need to build a $100 million company, right? Like, the more capital you load on top of an organization, the more investors you load on top of it, the higher and higher and higher the exit needs to be to return the capital at preferred rates. And then after that, then you have, the return for people, equity, shareholders in the business. If you don't have that, like, go build a business that puts a little bit of cash in your pocket for you and your family. And like, that is life changing. And there's so many opportunities out there to do that, like, everywhere. And, people who are coming out of the military, like, with those kind of skills and attributes, it's almost unlimited, the opportunities they have. And I recognize, like, here I am, I'm sitting here with some entrepreneurial experience, and maybe it's not always easy to kind of see that opportunity if you haven't been in those shoes. But I think that's kind of why, like, some of the work you guys are doing to help that. But, for us, like, at Alto, I mean, I'm not going to throw numbers out there what we want to get to, but, like, a life-changing outcome is far less than, a 9-figure exit. I'll just put it that way. And I think entrepreneurship gets romanticized. Like, it's, you've got to sell for 500 million. You've got to hit $1 billion. I think it's ridiculous. Like, go out and build a healthy, sustainable business that meets the goals that you have, your partners have, and have a lot of fun doing it.
I love that. Let's talk about content creation a little bit, because obviously when I first saw that you had a journalism major and were a baseball player, I was like, that was the communication major type thing of, I just need to get a major, but I'm here to play baseball. But it sounds like you actually genuinely enjoyed the creative writing and the journalism aspect and content creation. You mentioned that you got burnt down on it, but then you were drawn back after you took some time away and realized that this is something you enjoy. You obviously have a huge following on LinkedIn. I think you're 75,000 followers or something like that. You have a newsletter with 21,000 followers. Talk to us through how you develop content, what the goal has been, how long you've been working on this, so people can get a gauge for, their own process as they're trying to create some kind of content creation business.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Kevin, I wish my story was more like the baseball player who just needed a comms degree, because that would have meant I was a better baseball player, and probably would have been like headed to the big leagues and not working, forever. But sigh, that wasn't my story. Yeah, I grew up writing, and what's interesting is, growing up as a kid, I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved history. Those were kind of things that drew my attention in school. And as I got into, like, high school athletics and then even college athletics, I started to use writing also as a tool for sports, like as a form of visualization and mental training. And so writing has just always been part of my life and the way I express myself. And so, like, how did I get to where I am today? I mean, it's a lot of years and a lot of reps, but the way that I think about content creation for myself, and sort of the general, I think, framework I would give anyone who is thinking about content creation, is, I think, really start with, like, why do you want to create content? It sounds like an obvious question, but I think it's not obvious, actually. And the reason is, most people either aren't clear on why, or they're not honest on why. And if you can just step back and not judge the answer and just say, like, hey, I want to create content because I want to help people with mental health. Awesome. I want to create content because I want to build a business on top of that platform. Like, awesome. I want to create content because I want to be famous and get speaking deals. Like, cool, if that's what you want, right? But I think you need to know and be honest with what the goal is, at least generally, because that's going to dictate then how you navigate content world, like what you create, how you create it, etc. And obviously there's a lot of details on different platforms that we can dive into if you guys want to, but that's how I think about it. And so for me, just to make it more practical, I create content for two reasons. Like, one, it's something that I just genuinely love to do. I've done it my whole life, and I view it as a form of service, which is I recognize a weird answer. But for me, if I retired tomorrow and never worked again, I would still write. And the reason I would write publicly is just in hopes of sharing something that I've learned that could impact someone else positively. Like, I generally like in awe of the fact that like we can publish words on the internet and reach people around the world and impact their life somehow. And you don't always know that you're doing that, but the opportunity is there. So to me, that's just a super cool form of giving back and sharing your knowledge and experiences. But then the other reason I do it is for building businesses and for building a platform to support the things, I would say more than businesses, support the things that I am passionate about. So building businesses is one of them. But if I'm supporting foundations, like it's a platform to support that. If there are other ventures I'm up to or things that I want to get into, like it's a platform to support that. And so it's kind of like the way that I look at content creation is you're building a personal fire hose that you can then just point at whatever it is you want. And what you pointed at is going to be different depending on your goals and the season of life you're in, right? Like that's going to evolve as you evolve. But I would say like everyone should figure out a way. I strongly believe that to authentically share, right? I would not get caught up on like what should you do, all the best practices, all the things people say that you have to do online. I wouldn't get caught up in thinking that like you need to be impressive to share your story. I would look at it from the perspective of how can I help someone? How can I educate someone? How can I inspire someone? How can I pay forward what I have been given from someone else? And if you can just come from that spirit and then lean into whatever your skills or passions are, you're going to do well over time. But it takes time for sure. It's not an overnight thing.
Do you have a favorite platform to write on? I know you have, as I said, the newsletter. What do you do that through? Substack or something similar to that?
I use, this is not a plug and is not sponsored, but I use Beehive.
Okay.
So shout out Beehive if you want to sponsor that. LinkedIn to me is the best platform out there today from a social perspective. It's just the best growth opportunity, but also it's just the most positive community out there. X/Twitter is in a pretty rough place these days. I'm much more of a written word guy, so I'm not navigating to like Instagram or TikTok or something like that. So I enjoy LinkedIn, but I also love my newsletter because it is a much more, that's like the most intimate connection I probably have with people. I can go deeper on stuff there, and getting an email from someone who is like, I'm 63 years old. My marriage is kind of on the rocks. My kids are out of the house. I haven't really felt inspired in years. I thought it was kind of too late to start a new thing, but this issue today resonated with me, and it's showing me that like I still have a lot more that I can do. Like getting an email like that, there's no comment on social media that's going to compare for me. That is like the stuff that kind of keeps me going. And that's what I mean by like service. That's how I see it. So, but LinkedIn is the platform. I think if anyone's like, it's like just starting, I would just pick LinkedIn and start there.
100% agree. Greg and I talk about that all the time. It's like all the others are just garbage. Either if you're trying to run a business, it's very tough to get people inspired on platforms where they just want to be entertained, like TikTok, Instagram, stuff like that. It's just people sitting back want to be passively entertained.
Kevin just hates on TikTok and Instagram because he gets into like these little
doom scrolls, man,
rabbit holes on video. Yeah, just doom scrolling over there.
They're addicting.
They're terrible.
Addicting.
Yeah, it's bad. But getting on LinkedIn and actually having, I don't know, what is it, like 3,000 characters or something, is a pretty significant amount that you can put into a post, and then you have the comments. And newsletters, much to your point, I absolutely love doing those. I think everybody who has some kind of message, which most people do, they should start writing. Even if they don't have anybody reading it, just get those reps in to
Yep.
learn your voice, learn your style, learn what works with people, and just getting used to writing again, because it's very much a skill that atrophies over time, and you need to work on it consistently. How often are you writing? Like in terms of the long
So
form newsletters.
so writing and publishing, I think of as two different things. I'm writing every day. I think it's important even to put in like 10 minutes of working the muscle every day. Publishing, I publish a newsletter once a week, and I publish almost every day on social. But I've kind of eased off the cadence a little bit there because life has gotten a lot busier lately. But I sit down to write every day. It's kind of like I sort of feel like the muscle atrophies a little bit if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So even for folks like who aren't ready to publish, I would say start with writing still every day and work up to publishing. But one quick thing, it's not fresh in my mind because I was talking to one of our clients yesterday. A psychological hurdle that holds a lot of people back from publishing is they don't think they have anything meaningful or interesting to share. I was talking to a guy yesterday who literally is like one of the more impressive entrepreneurs that I've met, and he's running a really incredible business. He's like, yeah, but like if you're Elon Musk, it makes sense to like share your story. People want to know about that. Me, I'm like, it's kind of boring. And I was like, two things on that. Number one, people can't relate to Elon Musk. Like
Just
the
about to say
average
that.
person, it's completely unrelatable. All right. And like none of us need like another post on like the morning routine of Elon Musk. Like, it's just not helpful. People relate to normal stuff, like normal everyday human challenges. And so the second thing is like what we think is obvious to us is often enlightening to almost everyone else. And we all do this because our stories are ours. And so we overlook them. We think, oh, everyone knows that. Oh, that's not that interesting. That's not helpful. But we don't realize actually how far we've come and what we've experienced. And so I would encourage anyone to just share the process of what you're doing. Right? What are you doing? Are you training for a 100-mile race? Are you building a business? Are you working a job that's a new job and you're building new skills? What are you doing? Share the process. Share what you're learning in real time. That's going to be one, more interesting because people love to follow a journey and a story. But two, there will be insights and lessons in there that help somebody else who's a little bit behind you, even if you don't realize it.
I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think of Elon Musk as like Elon Musk is interesting, just like watching like
It's a novelty.
the Kardashians is interesting. You know what I mean? It's like it's interesting because it's like so out there and like you just want to know a little bit about like what that's like, but it's
Yeah.
nothing you actually like relate to. So I think you're 100% spot on there. That's such a great perspective shift to take on content creation.
And which newsletters do you enjoy reading? There's a ton of them out there. It's almost information, or it's not even almost. It is an information overload out there. Which newsletters do you take the time? Because obviously you're very busy. You're like, I'm going to read this one every Wednesday when it comes out, or every Saturday when it comes out, because the stuff they're putting out is great information. I like learning from their style. I like learning their techniques, and just newsletter growth in general.
Yeah, I subscribe to a bunch, and I find myself going through like different seasons of reading. Like I'll binge read certain newsletters if I'm like really focused on a certain problem or something. But right now, as you ask me that question, I'll read my buddy Sahil. Sahil Bloom has a great newsletter called the Curiosity Chronicle. He's a partner in Alpha Studios. He does great work. I really love if you're trying to become a better leader and a better manager, a manager in business. Dave Klein does a newsletter called, I think it's called the Management Playbook. I think he spells management like MGMT. He was at Bridgewater for 20 years or so, has some of the most practical and tactical management content out there. I always find something of value out of him. I would say those two. There's probably like 15 or 20 in my inbox I get every week, but those two, like week over week, the level of signal and insight to me, it separates themselves.
I have one other question before we jump to giving your business and everything a little pump. Do you do everything on the computer, or do you enjoy doing handwriting, journaling? Do you like having that textual feel, or are you good keeping everything on the digital space where you can organize it and ship it much quicker?
I'm so weird, guys. Like, so like, not to show notes from calls, but like, here's a notebook that I have on my desk at all times. This is more like business stuff goes in here. I've got another journal that I'll like write down content ideas in. I then organize my day on like these oversized sticky notes. So the things I want to get done today, I'll have a new one every day. And then I try to, and maybe this is just like where I'm at right now and it'll change, but I try to make, when I sit down at the computer, I want that to almost be like a formality. Like I'm really not trying to be that creative or thinking that much at my computer. I do most of my thinking away from it. And so I'll like log notes in a phone. I'll log them by hand in a notebook. And by the time, let's say I'm like sitting down to write a newsletter, like for this Sunday, I haven't written the issue yet. We're recording this on a Thursday. By the time I sit down, probably tomorrow morning, I will have like thought through the entire thing and have a mental structure and probably have a couple of notes written down. And then I'm just kind of like putting the words down at that point. So that's what works for me. I find it really hard to sit down and like force myself into creativity. Sometimes I do that. Like I also believe, like this is kind of the other side of that. I also believe in forcing yourself to like have an output goal that you hit. I think it's very easy to fall into the fallacy that like you always need to feel inspired or creative, which I don't think you do. Like I think writing can just be writing. Like when I was in journalism school, I had a professor that in like 3 seconds, he killed the idea of writer's block for us. We were all complaining one day that, oh, we all have writer's block. We can't do this. And he's like, do truck drivers get truck driver's block? No, they don't. They just drive their trucks. So writers write. So just start writing. And I was like, okay, like that's the perspective I'm going to have now going forward. And so that's what I do. I use notes, but if I have to sit down and write, like you just sit down and I'll start pumping stuff out. It's okay.
I love that. That's great information. We have a ton of content creators and writers within our community. And so having information like this from people who are executing very successfully and have systems in place that they've been able to replicate over and over and over again, it really helps people as they're struggling to get things started to see what works, what doesn't work, and they can pull tactical tricks from people like you to become successful faster, which is ultimately what we're trying to do at the Vet Collective is just get people to a certain level of success faster than they would have on their own, or if they had tried to piecemeal it from bits of information without a coherent community behind it.
Can we talk about that a little more? I think we don't need to pump up Alto Studios or anything I'm doing. I would love to hear more about that and provide more value to any of the vets who are listening. I'd be curious what it means to, or how you guys define, like help them have success faster, and like some of the biggest challenges you see in the guys who are trying to transition into, whether it's into the world of content creation or business, like just what are the common hurdles that you see?
Greg?
That's a loaded question. Because I think it's different for everybody. Because some people have the challenge of like getting over talking about their story, and like because I think that's a pretty common narrative amongst veterans is that they're just not great at talking about what they've done, and it makes sense because like all of us are very much like we're very team oriented, and what we did in the military is not a product of what we did, it's a product of what our team did. So I think that is probably the most difficult one to overcome for veterans is like trying to be a little bit more individualistic.
One thought on that, I've heard that from some of my buddies as well, and I totally get it and respect it. If someone is struggling with that, one approach to writing that I might take is then just tell stories about your team. Right? Like, I'm sure obviously there's stuff that has to be confidential and all that, so understood there. But who's someone that you learned a lot from? Like, just write something about them. Write something about, change the name, change details, whatever you need to do. Write about what the team did. Like, don't make it about you. If you're having a problem getting over that, like, totally fine. Like, make it about others. And I think that content is still going to be amazing. So I hear that a lot, Greg, and like, I so badly want to help vets like unlock that mentally for them, because I just feel like there's so much value that they can offer the world, and the whole thing holding them back is that it's just a mindset thing. It's not reality. They're not actually selfish. It's just this idea that they're going to come across that way, perhaps. So anyway, that's really interesting.
Yeah, another
Teddy,
big.
you'd be a great. We should have Teddy. Kevin, I'm talking.
I know.
So let me speak. Okay.
There's
Go to your corner.
There's the Netherlands
right.
delay. I'm dealing with it.
Yeah. No, that's not a Netherlands delay.
I'm making it a thing.
I'm just. Okay, fine. Anyways, Teddy, you'd be great to have on. So we do a webinar every month, and we have people talking about like SBA loans or entrepreneurship through acquisition, franchising, just like all of these different topics in entrepreneurship. And I think like having you on there to talk about content creation and everything that you've been up to on the content creation side and writing would be an awesome workshop if you'd ever be open to that.
I'd be happy to do it, guys. And like, if I can, live workshop some content with some guys, like help them get to a place where they could leave the call being like, okay, I've got a couple things that I feel good about writing and publishing now. That would be amazing. I always want to be respectful of, and some people they just don't want a big profile publicly. And I totally get that. But yeah, if I can help in any way, help veterans get over that fear. It's really an unfounded fear too, of like, I'm going to come across as whatever, as arrogant, as self-centered. I think there are some tactical ways around that. And just the amount of good that they could do in the world by sharing some of what they learned, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's legitimately an issue that a lot of veterans see, because the whole time in the military is quiet professionals, don't brag, keep what you've done to yourself. You don't need to go around broadcasting it. And then they get out of the military and they no longer have that organizational structure where everyone understands largely what you do. Like, you come over from SEAL Team 1 and you go to SEAL Team 7, there's an understanding of what you did. You don't really need to talk about it. But now when you leave and you need to go to the corporate space or start your own business, you have to learn to talk about yourself. You have to learn to promote yourself. And this isn't bragging about yourself, but this is making it so someone who doesn't know who you are, who doesn't understand outside of watching the TV show SEAL Team, what a SEAL does, or what a Green Beret does, or what any number of people in the military do, you need to be able to explain to them the things you've done, and not just what the team's done, because that's great, but people want to know what you individually have done.
Yeah.
To be able to help the organization grow. They want to see that you're actually a contributor. And so I think through writing, I think a lot of people can slowly break that habit, because at first you're just writing to yourself. You put it on a journal, you put it on a Substack that no one's actually reading. And then just through thinking through a lot of these ideas and putting them onto paper or onto a computer screen, you'll learn how to describe things and convey your emotions, and then you can start talking about it more and putting information out there, and you consolidate it and streamline it and make it into an eloquent statement, as opposed to bumbling around of really thinking about what it is and is this person going to find value in it. So I think there's huge impact that you can have in helping veterans tease these ideas out and give them a process to go from I'm uncomfortable writing and talking about myself, to I have valuable information that people want to hear, and I feel comfortable now putting that out there.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, Kevin, I thought if you're a SEAL, you just get out and you write a book. I thought that's just kind of what.
It comes with a
Yeah,
book deal.
Kevin's book has already been written.
We get our
Yeah,
paperwork when we
yeah.
leave the military, and it comes with a HarperCollins book deal,
Perfect.
plus a lifetime supply of hair gel. So it's a pretty good deal when you get out.
And beard
I'm not
and beard
bragging or
oil.
anything.
Yeah, that's pretty good severance if you ask me.
It's a lot of money in hair gel.
Well, when your hair is as good as yours, Kevin, I mean, you need to maintain it.
Just letting it flow. You get at some point you have to embrace being not in the military, civilian side. So I had the beard down to here, and then I had the longer hair. My wife's like, "You can have one, or you can have the other, but you just look like a Neanderthal or a homeless person when you have them both going." So she maintains. She's a good woman. She maintains my beard so that it's not as unruly as I would possibly leave it to my own devices.
Yeah, what would we do without our wives, man?
Cornerstone, man. They are the cornerstone.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Well, Teddy, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll coordinate with you to do one of these LinkedIn live events. I think there would be a huge interest in that inside of our community, and then just people in general who want to get involved in some kind of content creation. I think you have a lot of valuable insight to share with them. So thank you for taking the time today. Do you have any spots where people can reach out to you, where they can find you? Newsletter, business, LinkedIn, all that?
Yeah, you got to subscribe to the newsletter. That newsletter is awesome.
It's the process, right?
I don't read many newsletters, but I always read Teddy's. So
I appreciate that, Greg. We've been on a 3-week
it's
hiatus
legit.
because I've been training and life's been busy, but it's coming back this Sunday. No, you can find me on LinkedIn if you want to, but otherwise, if anyone got anything out of this, like I really do, want you just to support these guys, Kevin and Greg, and the work that they're doing, or find some other, foundation or something out there in your community that supports veterans. Like I really do have a heart for that. I think it's important work. I think we need to support our veterans more than we do. And just thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. And any way that I can be supportive going forward, you just let me know.
Thank you, Teddy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.